My name is Shani Stajnrod, and I'm going to talk with you about a complexity DDoS attack on recursive resolver. And this is a joint work with Yehuda, Afek, and Anat Bremler-Barr from Tel-Aviv University. So first, let's look at the DNS in a very high level. The DNS system is divided into three main parts: the clients, recursive resolvers, and authoritative servers. So if we are looking at the benign query flow, first the client is going to query the resolver about the wanted domain. And assuming the resolver has an empty cache for this specific query, it will start to query the chain of authoritative servers, starting with the root server, of course, then going to the EDU top-level domain, and then going to the UCLA EDU, finally receiving the IP address and returning it to the client, of course. So I'm here to talk with you about a complexity DDoS attack on the DNS recursive resolver. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first complexity which is computational complexity attack, and not like previous attack, a flood attack, which is actually a communication complexity attack. In this attack, one single malicious request equals 10,000 benign requests. And after disclosing this issue, we received 3 CVEs from bind, unbound, and not resolver. So returning back to the benign query flow, instead of returning the actual IP address of EDU server, most of the times the authoritative will respond with another type of response called the referralist response. And the main reason for that is to create high availability and fault tolerance. So in our example, we have this referral list with 7 names in it. So the first thing that the resolver is going to do is to look up each of those names in the cache and database, creating 14 lookups in total. And that's the time to tell you that those lookups are quite heavy in terms of instructions on the CPU and resolver processor. So because we don't have any useful information about these specific names in the referralist response, in previous attacks, like the NXNS attack, for example, the resolver would start to resolve all those names in parallel, creating a flood attack both on the resolvers and the authoritative servers. So in order to mitigate this attack, a new limitation was introduced called the referral limit limitation, in which the resolver is only allowed to create 5, in this example, new resolution processes per this specific authoritative response. And then after creating those resolution processes, it will turn on the no fetch flag. It's important to notice that this limitation did bound the number of requests being sent between the resolver and authoritative servers, but it did not bound any type of resource used by the resolver itself to find and look up those names in the memory. So it only bounded the number of requests being sent between the servers. So as we said, we're going to start to resolve 5 of those referral name servers in the list, and we will receive those 5 IP addresses. After receiving those IP addresses, the resolver is going to restart the resolution process in a way, because we just focused on the names in the referralist response, but we do need to go back in a way to the original client query and resolve it. So as part of this restart event, all the flags are being cleared, including the no fetch flag that we've just turned on. So the resolver is going to query about the original client query, receive the IP address, and then after receiving it, it's going to respond it to the client. So now let's see how those mechanisms are being used as part of the NRDelegationAttack. And I'm going to only show you 1 of 4 variants of this attack, and you can, of course, see all of the variants in the paper. So in this variant, we have the malicious client querying about the malicious request, and the resolver is again going to start to resolve the query between the authoritative servers. Finally, it's going to be directed to another malicious authoritative server, which is owned by the attacker. This server is going to respond to the resolver with a very long referral list response. In our example, it's going to be 1,500 names in this referral list. And like we said before, the first thing that's going to happen is that the resolver is going to look up all of those names in the cache and database, creating 3,000 lookups in this specific example. And of course, n is going to be greater than the referral limit, so we're going to start only 5 new resolution processes and turn on the no-fetch flag. In this specific variant, the attacker has 2 malicious authoritative owned by him. So we're going to be redirected to actually another malicious authoritative server, and we're going to query 5 of the names that were shown in the referral list and receive a non-responsive to DNS queries IP as response from it. Now, as we saw before, we're going to have the restart event in which the no-fetch flag and all the flags are going to be cleared. And the resolver is going to try and resolve the original client query with this non-responsive resource. And there's 2 things to notice about this issue. The first thing is that we need this resource to be non-responsive because we want the chain reaction of the attack to continue. If the resolver is going to receive any type of useful information, for example, non-existent or IP address, it can return it to the client and the attack would stop. So the only reason we need it to be non-responsive is to keep the chain reaction of the attack going. And that's actually the reason that this attack is named NR, non-responsive delegation attack. Another thing to point here is that we can use any type of non-responsive to DNS queries resource. For example, if we're using www.google.com, it does exist in the internet, but it is not a DNS server, so it won't respond to any of our DNS queries. And that's good enough for this attack to continue. So in a way, we did go back to the original client query, but we did not get any type of useful information for the resolver to use. So the next thing that's going to happen is that the resolver is going to go back to the referral list and search again all the names in it, creating yet another 3,000 lookups or 2n lookups. Then, because we don't have any memory about turning on the no-fetch flag because we just cleared it as part of the restart event, we're going to start another 5 new resolution processes, receiving 5 more non-responsive IP responses, and again, going through the whole process of restarting the query, the resolution process, lookuping again, restarting again, and this whole process is going to continue until one of the other resolver's limitation is going to be reached. For example, we do have the restart limit limitation, which is 100, or a timeout event. And upon reaching those limitations, we're going to stop the resolution process and return a fail response to the client. So let's look at the experimental results of this attack. First, by looking at the NRDelegation complexity factor, we can see that one malicious request consumes 10,000 more instructions than original client request. So it's actually billions of instructions compared to hundreds of thousands of benign requests. And that's only for one malicious client query. How does this actually translate to the resolver throughput? So in this graph, I'm going to show you only the throughput for benign users, while of course the attack takes place. So for benign, for example, without any attack, this server is able to answer about more than 12,000 requests per second. And when using 100 referrals in the referral list, this number is dropped to 150 requests and then complete denial of the service. When using 500 referrals, this number is reduced to 80. And when using 1,500 referrals in the referral list, this number is dramatically reduced to 20 requests, and then the server completes deny service for any legitimate clients. And of course, we did test the attack on other vendors, and we observed similar behavior from all of those. Also, we tested the attack on 16 open resolvers, which all seem to be vulnerable to the attack. So to mitigate the attack, we decided to consider only K, or in the chosen example, 20 names from the referral list in this referral response. So instead of looking on the whole list, which includes a lot of names, we will be only looking on 20 of those. Of course, we had other mitigation options, but this was the one adopted by most of them. So looking at the actual throughput using the patched versions, without any attack, we did observe more than 12,000 requests per second. With the attack, this number was dropped to 80, as I said before. And with the patched version, the resolver was able to answer on more than 10,000 requests per second. And the interesting thing to see here is that no matter what the size of the referral list was, the attack was bounded the same way because we did bound the searches at the same number. And we also tested it, of course, on other vendors. In terms of responsible disclosure, we disclosed this issue with all the vendors we tested, of course, with all the open resolvers and ICANN, which directed us to more resolvers that we tested and patched their versions as well. And to conclude, in our attack, one malicious query equaled 10 to the 9th machine instruction, which is huge. And previously, we saw an XNS attack in 2020, NRDelegationAttack in 2023. What's going to be next? Is our mitigation good enough? Are there any variants that could be used that we didn't mitigate with those mitigations? Of course, if we did have automatic verification methods, we could use that. And one last thing I wanted to show you is that our setup and measurements were accepted as USENIX security artifact. And actually, you can test whatever you want on the DNS system in our setup because it allows you to test all the DNS protocol in a closed environment. That's why we could test our attack without hurting the actual DNS system in the real world. And thank you, that's it.